Good morning, everybody. Good morning, and welcome to Espresso with Carlo. I am actually having a double espresso, Brad. It's one of those busy days for all of us, but it's great to have so many people tuned in today to hear from Councilman Brad Lander, who is running for the position of New York City Comptroller. Let me start by thanking Langen Engineering, who is sponsoring our series. And George Leventis, one of our board members, who is on. George, thank you. So I'm going to jump right into it because we've got Brad for 45 minutes. Brad currently serves as a member of the New York City Council. He represents the 39th District in Brooklyn. For those of you that don't know Brooklyn, it's Park Slope, Gowanus, little, different parts of Borough Park and a great district. Brad serves as the Deputy Leader for Policy. He is a co-founder of the Council's Progressive Caucus and a member of the Jewish Caucus. Brad has really been a leader in bringing participatory budgeting to New York City. He's advocated for a more sustainable and equitable New York City, and that's something he's made a central point in his candidacy for Comptroller. Brad has fought to combat the wage theft of freelance workers, another pillar of his campaign. He's advocated strongly for improving transit infrastructure, for building new schools, for making schools fairer and more transparent, reforming the NYPD, and increasing affordable housing. Prior to all of this, Brad served as the director of the Pratt Center for Community Development and the Fifth Avenue Committee. I've known Brad a very long time from my days at the Brooklyn Borough President's Office, even before Brad was elected to the City Council, and we've done some great things together. And I'm excited to call you a friend, Brad. So without further ado, Brad Lander, City Councilman, candidate for City Comptroller.
Thank you so much, Carlo. It's really nice to be with you. I was thinking back about, the time we spent at Borough Hall and at the Brooklyn Chamber. We've been through a lot of crises together, but obviously nothing like the current one. And the work to fight for the city's future together is just so critical. So I'm sitting here, on the banks of the Gowanus Canal, which kind of runs right through the middle of my district, and we can talk about plans there to build a more just, sustainable, vibrant future for the city. And I got my Brooklyn, it's hard to see with the virtual background, my Brooklyn Public Library coffee mug with my coffee here. So
love it.
It's great to be with you this morning. Look, it's no secret we're facing one of the greatest challenges in our city's history, and this is a critical time to think about its future. Obviously, for the next 6 months, while the campaigns are taking place, but of course, before anybody new is in office, we've got an urgent set of public health challenges that we have to put first. And I just feel so deeply grateful for the new federal government in every way. I was just listening to a conversation with Vivek Murthy, who's leading the Biden COVID task force, because obviously getting us those vaccine doses, building out the city's infrastructure, getting the vaccines in people's arms, critical for saving thousands, maybe tens of thousands of the lives of New Yorkers, but of course also critical for opening up our economy again and making it possible to begin building for our future. We're working hard in the council at that. At the beginning of the crisis, I helped set up a thing called the Neighbor Network to have volunteers calling homebound and isolated seniors just to check in on them and provide some connection. But we've converted that to be a vaccine outreach effort and have so much work to do there. And obviously the other thing about winning the federal, control of the U.S. Senate and the White House, that's essential fiscal policy for New York City, because without the federal relief we urgently need, we won't be able to keep the subways running at their capacity and invest in our city. But now that all that's done, and with our eyes on getting past the public health crisis, it is time to start planning for what a just and durable recovery will look like, and we have to start investing in it now. And that's going to take honesty and creativity. We can't imagine away the budget gaps, and hard choices are going to have to be made. Part of the controller's job is to be honest about revenue and expenses and make smart recommendations for how to balance the budget fairly. And I've done that in the council, and I'll do it in the controller's office. But shrinking services and underinvesting in our future out of anxiety is both cruel social policy and also bad economic policy. We must invest in the city's long-term thriving. And one way I like to think about it is this: out of past crises, out of the Great Depression and World War II, city leaders invested in creating the subway, in the Mitchell-Lama program, in building CUNY, in NYCHA. And those investments, all of which were physical infrastructure investments, built a platform for shared economic growth that both benefited our city, created jobs, and built a more equal and inclusive platform for our city to thrive on for decades to come. And that, I believe, is what we have to do now. While we make hard short-term choices, we have to make long, smart investments in getting ready to confront the climate crisis, in building a more equal city, and in creating the next generation of economic growth and jobs that'll help our city thrive and flourish. So that's why I'm running for Comptroller. As you know, I've worked really hard in the past on how we get better money for our capital budget, how we strengthen the city's capital projects management so we could invest more smartly in our infrastructure, create that platform for growth. And then what the Comptroller has to do, in addition to helping win that reform, is make smart and thoughtful and responsible deployment of the pension funds to guarantee retirement security, but invest in the long-term future. Watch out for the city's budget, short-term and long-term. And finally, make city government work better. I'm a progressive, that's not a secret. And I believe government has to do big, bold things to create opportunities, win more equality, confront the climate crisis. But government can't deliver on any of its promises when projects take too long, when money's wasted, when corruption goes unchecked, when there's nothing done about mismanagement. And the Comptroller's office is a critical role for both having those bold goals built into our long-term budgeting future and rolling up your sleeves, doing the audits, doing the work to make government work better so it truly delivers for all New Yorkers now and on to the future. That's why I'm running. That's why I really want to be a partner to the Building Congress and its members in that work.
Great, thank you. And Brad, and that's amazing. A lot of people don't know, you and I spent a lot of time during quarantine on the phone and texting. And I will say this, you truly supported our goals of getting the administration at City Hall to move the capital program forward. And one of the things we talked about is that when you cut capital programs, whether it's at the SCA or DDC or any other city agencies, you're hurting many individuals who live and work in New York City, and you're really hurting MWBE companies. That's because right. Many of those are doing work at SCA and DDC and other places. Give us a sense a little bit about how you would push the next mayor to really open up opportunities on building. And I think you said it right. How do we get out of a crisis? We build grand things in New York that affect communities, particularly in the boroughs.
Absolutely. So a few thoughts here. First, I was an honor to join you and your members in that fight, back in the spring and continuing into the summer and the fall to protect and restore funding to the city's capital budget. Cutting the capital budget does the things you say, hurts MWBEs and eliminates jobs, but it also hurts your long-term future platform for sustainable economic growth, because every year that you wait, it costs more to fix that road or fix that bridge, so you wind up hurting yourself economically, diminishing business ability to create growth. And you don't even save very much in the short term because you're borrowing that money over 20 or 30 years. We actually have room in the city's budget. You don't want to get above about 15% for debt service on your long-term capital. We're at about 12%. Interest rates are at historic lows. It is time to invest. And we fought hard. We got about $500 million restored to the capital budget last year. We got a little more restored this year, but we got to keep going. We should actually be expanding that capital budget to invest in both repairing past infrastructure, NYCHA, the subways, the roads and bridges, and investing in the future in broadband, internet access, climate resiliency, and the platforms for future economic growth. So I'm just about to put out a plan for investing better in our infrastructure that goes really deep into this. And that has sort of four parts, and I won't go through them all. But first, get a better grip on capital projects management. The city doesn't do it transparently. The contracts don't move through the process in an easy way. There's not a good partnership between the controller's office and the agencies, although there's a good pilot. So I've got a plan for just more transparent tracking, better partnership from the controller, and auditing of those agencies which are moving too slowly, as well as encouraging the next mayor to create a deputy mayor for infrastructure to coordinate all of this much better. Right now, there's no one shy of the mayor to whom all the capital agencies report. And that's just crazy. It's no wonder the system is so haphazard. Reform the management system, do better front-end planning. Right now, we don't actually develop a long-term infrastructure plan aligned with our plans for land use growth. So there's some good work some agencies have done, like the School Construction Authority now assesses its portfolio of buildings every year to see where need is, but we don't do that with the rest of our infrastructure. So we don't have a good roadmap to what infrastructure is at risk of failing, which water mains should we, address sooner than later. So grounded in assessment, combine it with comprehending for the city's future growth, make the 10-year capital strategy into a real plan for our infrastructure. Third, keep doing more to align it with our values. That's investing in MWEs, that's green procurement, that's involving communities, because things will go a lot easier if communities see the value they're getting in growth. And then finally, with those things in place, we can and must put more money and bring more resources into our infrastructure projects. So that's be willing to use this historic moment of low interest rates to increase investment, use public-private partnerships, use new strategies like design build, and new tools like we're piloting in Gowanus, where we actually build on rezoning and other private sector programs to help us get a broader set of infrastructure investments even than we can through the capital budget. So that's the plan. I think it could go a long way.
Yes, and we've been calling for a deputy mayor for infrastructure for a while now.
I have an idea of who a good one might be.
Yes, and I think it's so critical that everything is coordinated. And if you really think about it, with the green energy, with green infrastructure, with what President Biden and the administration is talking about doing on an infrastructure bill, with soon to be Deputy Secretary Polly Trottenberg in Washington, and then with Governor Cuomo, who is really spearheading the largest infrastructure program in America, it would be insane for the city of New York not to take this moment and really say, let's invest in our boroughs, in our future. And we're here to support you on that, and we think it's critical.
Yeah, I really agree.
Your backdrop is a place I know well, you know well. I'm not sure if all of our members know well. So maybe tell us the backdrop and then talk a little bit about Gowanus rezoning. I know you've been working on that for many years.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah. So yes, this is the Gowanus Canal. At one time, 150 years ago, so it runs in between Park Slope on the one side and Carroll Gardens on the other, with Borum Hill up at the north there, where you can see sort of behind me in the picture. 150 years ago was the busiest industrial waterway in the United States. The shipping, the harbor in Red Hook and Sunset Park was extremely busy, and was used both for manufacturing and shipping in and out, as well as power production. There were 3 places that had coal gasification plants to produce the energy that fueled the city's subways and power grid. So unfortunately, at that time, there was not good environmental planning, and the canal was essentially used as an open sewer for coal tar from coal gasification and from all kinds of industrial activities. So it became very polluted, and that's amazing how long ago it actually was polluted. I read somewhere that the dissolved oxygen content in the canal went to 0 in 1904. So it's been very polluted a long, long time. This finally worked to do something about it. Some of that kicked off by the city and the Flushing Tunnel that was renovated a few years ago. And then about a decade ago, the EPA came in with the Superfund which, I supported when it came in. Not everyone did. The Bloomberg administration was not enthusiastic about it, but I think a thorough cleanup is the key to a thriving area around the canal. And the dredge has just begun. That's why I'm using this picture. This about 2 months ago in November, the dredge of the canal actually started. It's going to take a few years, but the canal is going to be dredged and new tanks are going to be built to reduce the amount of combined sewer overflow that comes into the water. And with that future, with that cleanup, it's now possible to really envision and develop the area around the canal in an inclusive way. So starting back in 2013, actually, we started convening community conversations, at first without the city or city planning. We had some allies like you and elected officials and businesses around the canal, but mostly it was residents, people in the neighborhood, imagining a future for the area. We called that process Bridging Gowanus. And look, everyone, your folks know, in New York City, there aren't that many people that are jumping up and down about new development of, taller buildings, taller than the surrounding brownstone communities. But the community really took a good, honest look and said, look, Park Slope and Carroll Gardens are wonderful neighborhoods, but they have no affordable housing. You can't live here if you're a working class or low income family. And if we're going to be honest to our values, we have to create affordable housing here, make our schools more integrated. We want to preserve a lot of what's great about the neighborhood. There's light manufacturing and arts and artisan uses. So let's make more room for job creation, but let's make it more inclusive. And let's do all of that with smart plans for sustainability, to deal with the fact of sea level rise and canal pollution, and with the infrastructure that growth requires, as schools and transit and open space investments. So that's what we've worked to do. And we can go into the details more. It has certainly, like all of the land use planning and real estate development processes in the city, gotten contentious. The city was supposed to certify the Gowanus rezoning last Wednesday, but a set of neighbors who were not enthusiastic about new construction near their homes sued, saying that virtual ULURP they don't like it. And for now, it's on pause while a judge reviews their case. But I'm optimistic that it will be moving forward soon. Roughly the vision is to allow new construction of resident mixed-use development around the canal and Thomas Green Park and on 4th Avenue that would create about 8,000 new homes, about 3,000 of them affordable. There are not 3,000 affordable homes in Brownstone, Brooklyn today. So create a lot of affordable new homes, but with a vibrant waterfront esplanade, a lot of room for light manufacturing, arts and artisan uses. We call them the Gowanus mix, and a lot of attention to sustainability, infrastructure, schools and transit. Actually, I'd love to talk a little more about the school and transit tools, which I think are pretty innovative.
I love it. And, I think for our members, this will be one of the largest rezonings to happen, at least in the last decade, really. Yeah. There hasn't been something, and I think you mentioned something, because I remember sitting with you when you started this process a long time ago, and really just saying, wow, this is an opportunity for the community and for business groups and everybody to come together and work on it. So we got to get this done, and the Building Congress put in some kind words in support of getting this past the lawsuit. But give us a vision of the schools. I think that's an important piece to it.
Yeah. Just on the lawsuit, I'll say yesterday I saw that 42 of the 46 members of Community Board 6 also signed a letter saying, great, we want the process to move forward. Some of us, already know we support the plan. Some of us already know we probably oppose the plan. Some of us are eager, most of us are eager to see the environmental impact statement and judge impacts, but it's time to have a public debate. So, so I was encouraged by that. I think, people have in our minds a certain way that these rezonings go. And this one is different. This one really was developed with extensive community input, because it is a great neighborhood of opportunity, where you already have a whole lot of market rate housing. Gentrification happened here many years ago. There's different opportunities. This won't displace people. It'll create new opportunities if we get it right. There's still some work to do, especially for investing in the public housing that's behind me. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But yeah, I want to tell you about the school bonus tool and the transit bonus tool, because I think they're both really innovative and I hope will be a model for a new infrastructure. The transit bonus is going to be rolling out citywide in the near future, but it's coming in Gowanus first, and it's a little modeled on what happened in East Midtown, but obviously at a much kind of lower level. Basically, developers near transit. So if you're on 4th Avenue within 500 feet of a subway station, you'll be able to get a 20% density increase in exchange for infrastructure investments in transportation infrastructure, in subways or streets. And hopefully, therefore, for example, at Union and 4th Avenue, we're going to get a new subway elevator, which we've needed for such a long time, and a new stairwell as part, and a new subway entrance as part of development there. It's a great model. The schools model in some ways is even more creative. For the sites around, because we're going to need a couple new schools. One is going to get built on the big public site in the plan called Public Place, which will be all affordable housing, 950 units of housing, a waterfront public park, and a new school built by the SCA. But we'll probably need some more, especially as 3K rolls out. So the way that will work for all these sites along the canal, they'll have, their higher building, their tower, 20, 22 stories along the canal. And then they'll be lower as they meet the neighborhood. They'll come down to about 5 stories on their outer edges where those meet the neighborhood. Those outer buildings are the perfect place for a school. You can make it a little bigger, put a school on the playground on the rooftop, and it's a dynamite space. So the way the plan works, you'll get extra FAR, but not a residential bonus. You build your residential building with its affordable housing, and then over here, you can have more space, enough to build the school. And when you start, you'll tell the community and the SCA, I'm getting ready to start. Does the SCA think we need a school? If they do, they'll make a deal with that developer to use that extra space. SCA pays for the build out. It's a win-win, because since that land can't be used for anything else, the SCA could get it for much less than they would pay for, for other real estate. So it'll be a much more affordable to the city to buy, but it will still be attractive to developers since it lets them do one more thing with their space. So that's what's brand new in the rezoning as a schools tool. And it's pretty flexible because it covers about a dozen sites, even though we probably only need 2 or 3 sites beyond Public Place. And I think it's just a really smart approach that I think will meet the needs of our community for growing school seats in a affordable and smart way. But I also think it holds real promise as a model for other kinds of public-private partnerships.
Well, it sounds great. And I think, look, for the city, the borough, and our members, getting this done right is critical. So we're looking forward to it. I want to move to the office of Comptroller. A lot of people don't know what the Comptroller does. Our members know it very clearly because the Comptroller approves and expedites payments for contractors and subcontractors and everything. So, and that's something we've worked with the current Comptroller, and even before I was here with past Comptrollers. Give us a sense of how you see the office running, and what could contractors and people building the city expect in terms of, we need to get paid so we can put money in people's pockets. And again, particularly MWBEs who don't always have the leverage of a big firm that can carry them. They need to get paid.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. Usually when I describe the office, I do fiduciary for the pension funds, budget oversight, accountability through audits, and I get to procurement, kind of fourth, because for most people, procurement is not the thing that they're the most excited about, but it is so critical. So I'm going to start there. The Comptroller is the last stop in the procurement and contracting process. That's true for capital projects, but for all other procurement as well, for services and contracting. And we have to do so much better. I started talking about this before. That whole system is just broken. It's so slow, it's clunky. One hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing. That's a problem for everyone. It's a problem for those MWBEs because they don't have enough working capital to sit around and wait a year till they start to get paid, but everything costs more as a result. So I first, as I mentioned, got the city to pass a bill that will establish a capital projects tracking system. So it'll become transparent where things are in the process. We're doing the same with contracting. I'm the co-sponsor of a bill, Intro 1627, which will shine a light on how contracts move through the process. I'll expand this program called the Expanded Work Allowance Pilot that some of your members may have used, where the controller works with DDC to enable faster payments. So there's a lot we can do to make procurement work more smoothly. Unfortunately, I have a lot of good things to say about the current controller, who I think has done a lot of smart work. But I think it's been too much, and this is not just Scott Stringer, I think it was true with John Liu, it's true in general, because the controller's office obviously is a junior partner to the mayor, there's a temptation to use the contracting sign-off as a kind of threat, and obviously every so often there's a contract where there's a problem because there's corruption and it didn't get caught. So you have to look out for that. But I think there's been too much of a, I'm gonna hold that card. What I wanna do is say, let's fix this system. I want procurement to flow more smoothly. It has to look out for corruption. It has to do its MWBE work. It has to be thoughtful about neighborhoods, but let's build that into the process up front, so that once we start, procurement can roll productively. And that's going to be a big piece of my work. So that's in procurement. But in other areas of the office, there's room to do a lot as well. The audit bureau is actually the biggest bureau of the agency. Right now, there is not a capital projects audit team. So I want to have an audit team that actually is looking at capital projects management to help with exactly that acceleration and more efficiency. And even as fiduciary to the pension funds, I was having a conversation with Henry Garrido, the president of DC 37. He'd like to see more of the pension fund dollars of his members invested in infrastructure projects. He knows that there's a set of pension funds around the country that have focused on long-term infrastructure investment. I think even there is a really good opportunity to use the tools of the office to advance a smart recovery in a way that creates economic value, creates jobs, gives MWBEs more opportunities, and then strengthens the city for the long term.
And invests in the 5 boroughs. And I think,
Exactly.
one thing that we'll be pushing for is as the next controller comes in and looks at where that money is going, I think it's got to be a push to invest in infrastructure for the borough.
One idea of Scott's that I really like that that the mayor killed, but that I want to pick up is for what he calls green bonds. We know we have so many investments we need to make in both climate mitigation and adaptation. We're going to need to spend billions of dollars in the coming years. And if we don't, it'll cost us far more when storms hit that we're not prepared for, when heat and sea levels rise in ways we haven't prepared. So green bonds are a creative strategy of public finance. They're municipal bonds, you get investors in them, but they let you invest in the green infrastructure that the city will need for the future.
Well, we love it. We have 15 minutes left. I want to talk a little politics for a few minutes. Obviously, 5 months from what's today's date? Is it today or tomorrow? Actually, in less than 5 months,
yeah,
we will have had a Democratic primary for mayor, controller, public advocate, 5 borough presidents, and 50-something members of the city council. And with ranked choice voting, we will actually know on the day of the primary who the winner of those elections will be. And in many cases, particularly, maybe not the mayor, but every other race, we will probably know who will be taking office the following January. So, a couple of months from now, we will know who's the winner of most of these races. So, assuming you win, you will be starting with a basically entire new city government at a moment where we've got crisis upon crisis upon crisis. Give us a sense of where you see, your experience and your new role, if you are a controller, playing into a new city government.
Yeah.
And how can you leverage that to really get some things done?
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, I feel like I come to this moment with a set of experiences that will be really valuable for those partnerships. Before I was in government, I spent 15 years in the nonprofit and community development sector. So I ran the Fifth Avenue Committee. I was the chair of the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. And then I ran the Pratt Center for Community Development. So I built up partnerships with, with folks in the New York Building Congress, with construction folks, with financing, and with the nonprofit world. And a lot of those relationships have continued in very strong fashion, like yours and mine, but many others as well. For the past decade, I've been in the city council where I've passed some big, bold legislation. A lot of it, as you mentioned earlier, to make sure workers get a fair shake, make sure fast food workers have stable schedules and a living wage, that freelancers don't get stiffed out of payments that they're owed. So a lot of progressive legislation, but also a lot of legislation about making sure government delivers on what it promises, like the work around the capital budget. And it's really that combination that I want to bring to the office. That's a set of relationships with folks out in communities all across the 5 boroughs. And there's a hunger for more attention to neighborhoods, an obvious need for an anti-racism approach to our city that we've seen in this pandemic. We have to build a more genuinely inclusive, multiracial, equal, democratic, small d democratic city if we want it to thrive and flourish. And I've got a lot of those relationships. This isn't a pitch, but if people look at endorsers on the website, you'll see a lot of the folks who represent communities as well as labor supporting the campaign. But what I really think I can do in the job is be someone who on the one hand can partner. Even though I had a lot of big policy disagreements with the Bloomberg administration, we did a lot of partnership work together in my district and around the city. And the mayor the relationship between the mayor and the comptroller is so important here. You were gonna have to be able to partner. It's a crisis moment. We're gonna have to help the next mayor succeed in promoting recovery, but you also need someone who's independent, who tells the truth, who works with communities, who can call it out when things aren't where they need to be, and then can really build, put the tables together, bring people together across some of those lines of difference to get the job done. And then lastly, and I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because I think it's true for the Biden administration, and I know it'll be true for the future of the city. We have to be able to have government lead in doing big things. There's no way to recover from this crisis, no way to create the jobs we need, no way to confront inequality, no way to get ready for climate change in a city with aging infrastructure without big, bold government action. But we can only do that if we make it work better. And I do think progressives sometimes do not focus enough on delivery, on making government work, to deliver on the promises. I think that's what you want in a comptroller, and that my experience will put me in a really good place to be a partner to do it. That's a shared project. No one person could do it by themselves. It has to be done together.
You mentioned earlier public-private partnerships. And we obviously are a big proponent of that. We think, given funding issues, you're not going to be able to rebuild the city and the nation really without true public-private partnerships. Give us a sense of your vision on that, and how would you include the private sector and our members in rebuilding the city?
Yeah. So I do think it begins with public planning processes at the beginning. I think part of why this can get a bad rap is that when people see it as driven by an individual developer, I'm a developer, I've got a site, I own it. It's no surprise that what I'm focused on is how to make it work in a way that makes financial sense for me. And so if I come forward with a plan and then I say, to get what I want, I'm going to throw in A, B, or C, then I think people are like, I don't know whether that's really thought through from the public side. So what I want to do is have us do the public planning first. I'd like to see us do an every 10-year comprehensive plan that says we need to grow the city. We got to create more jobs, more affordable housing. Let's be thoughtful about where that growth is taking place, and then align where do we need new schools? Where do we need new transportation infrastructure? Where do we need new open space? Aligned with that thoughtful plan with communities involved, but also mindful of the city's long-term needs, given that growth. And then once you do that, then it is possible for, on the one hand, the city to align the capital budget. Some things have to be done with city capital dollars, and we're going to spend them here, align with that plan. But then you can do exactly what we're proposing here in Gowanus for schools and transit to say, okay, this is an area that through public planning, we said makes sense for growth. We're going to make room for it. But we know some new infrastructure is going to be needed on those sites. And so now sometimes it'll be a requirement, like you can't dump more CSOs into the Gowanus Canal. That's not an incentive, that's a requirement. Sometimes it'll be an incentive, like the transit or schools tools that we have for Gowanus. And I think that can really set a platform for making sure that we align those public goals for a more equal and sustainable and affordable city in a way that works for then private developers to fit into in ways that work to get those projects built and financed and delivered, in ways that work for their owners, because obviously they have to, but in ways where the public value is delivered along lines that are connected to the plan we have for the whole city, and people can really see the value in the things they know are needed.
I agree. And look, Gowanus, and one of the reasons I've been a big supporter from day one with you is that this will create thousands and thousands of construction, engineering, architecture jobs in the short term, and then jobs in the long term. And the people working these jobs live in these communities, and it's so critical.
That's right. And no, that's true for, for all kinds of the investments we need. We just got this great announcement for the new wind turbine business in Sunset Park, a public investment in offshore wind. That's going to be so many great jobs for New Yorkers, and that is true in the new construction of residential and mixed use development in places like Gowanus. That is true on our public infrastructure building projects like those schools. And of course, it's true for the Green New Deal projects for mitigation and climate adaptation. One other idea we're working on as part of my climate plan, we put up the first plan we put out was the climate recovery plan, because it seems to me, the next 8 years are the critical ones for getting the city ready for our climate future. It's hard for any mayor. All the mayors are going to say it's a high priority, but every day the headlines scream about crime or the economy. And so keeping an eye on climate change is you need someone whose job is to pay attention to the long term. And that's the controller's office. So I'm going to make that job one. We've got a bold plan for it. And one idea I have is to use a combination of city capital and investment dollars to really build out rooftop solar. I think our current model of, I've got rooftop solar on my house and it worked for me, but we are never going to get to the scale we need by hoping that individual homeowners will work their way through the myriad tax breaks and financing incentives. So let's do a big, bold city plan. The city can build it, can pay a building owner a rent for their roof, and could get it built out at scale. And again, that's something that could create a lot of jobs, put a lot of people to work, offer a lot of MWBE opportunities, and create a municipally owned clean energy utility that makes us more ready for our future.
When I worked as chief of staff to Marty Markowitz many moons ago, we had sat with folks in the Bloomberg administration, and Marty wanted to use a chunk of his capital allocation to start a pilot program. And he wanted to do it in the Ditmas Park, Prospect Park South area, and really pay for it and work with homeowners and everything. And the government bureaucracy to try and get that done. So I commend you for that. I think the amount of jobs it creates, how it helps communities and how it helps the environment is incredible. So.
Yeah. And now you guys were ahead of your time because
we were ahead of our time on a lot of things and no one got it.
But solar now is ready for that.
Yeah, it's ready.
It's still not ready to get done at scale, one homeowner at a time, but it is ready for a big investment, a big expansion.
I think one of the things we hear about is 5G broadband, parts of the city, and we saw it in this crisis where kids don't have broadband. Give us a sense of your vision for that, and what can we do together to build out this critical piece of infrastructure for the city?
I think that the plan that the city put forward for broadband for all a few months ago is a good plan. I'm disappointed with how long it took and that it isn't moving more quickly. But I took a look at it and I think it gets things mostly right. There are places where cities are looking at, fully municipal broadband, but we already have so much infrastructure here. It does not make sense to start over, but it does make sense to make smarter use of the city's poles and buildings and infrastructure. There was just a pretty good settlement. I've been part of beating up on Verizon Fios for years now. They made a commitment to get to the entire city. Yeah, this is for cable, for broadband, not for 5G, but it's a good example. And they have finally agreed to make a big additional set of investments. We need the same model for 5G, which is an insistence on using the city's infrastructure to make sure there aren't gaps in the system, that it's covered everywhere, that everyone can get it affordably. And, there was this powerful story in the paper just this morning, or maybe it was yesterday. The city, when pushed on not delivering access in its shelters, basically said, well, we have to do it this way. We have to do it with T-Mobile. It's going to take months. And by then the kids will be back in school anyway. And a couple of shelter operators showed that you could use a hub approach instead. And they have their kids having access today. So that's the kind of the city's got to leverage its assets and make room for flexibility and creativity while holding to the standards that everybody gets it. So this is one where I'd also welcome talk from your members. If you have people that are more expert, I would love to follow up on that.
And I think, we'll leave it at this. I think one of the things that really the entire city government in 2022 needs to do at every level is make use of the private sector and not try and just figure it out on their own, but you've got smart, talented people in the city of New York, that as you're thinking about development, we could, set up discussion groups and real planning groups of architects and engineers and contractors and developers and people that understand broadband, and just let's get it done together.
I totally agree. And this is where I find this puzzling because, what I think happens, as you can see with the current mayor, he has a kind of allergy to working with the private sector and inviting people to be at the table. Then you have people suspicious that if the private sector is at the table, the public will get crowded out. It's so straightforward that you need both those things. You want to start from the public goals, right? You don't start, it's true that those projects will create jobs and economic opportunities for companies, but you're not starting from that point. You're starting from, we need to get broadband built out so that our whole city is covered. We need a 5G infrastructure. We need in all these areas infrastructure sufficiency. So let's bring people together to set the public goals, informed by what it will really take to do it, in a partnership between folks on the consumer side and folks on the business side. And that, again, is a good role for the Comptroller's office. We need a mayor that'll do it too. But it is definitely something that bringing, business and labor and communities to the table.
We agree, and they're all critical. Well, it's 10:45. I know we had a hard stop. This was great. Obviously, Brad, you and I could talk for hours, which we often do. But it's really exciting to have you with us. We wish you well, and I know whatever happens next, that you are committed to a really great future for New York City.
Thank you, Carlo. I really appreciate it. I look forward to continuing to work with you and your members for a lot of years to come. We got work to do together, so it's time to all roll up our sleeves.
We agree. Thank you. And again, George Lamentis and Langen, thank you for hosting us. Don't forget, everybody, our annual meeting is on Thursday. We will be announcing our keynote speaker in a few hours, and it's somebody that you will all want to hear from. I can tell you that. So, Brad, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Great to see you, Carlo. Thank you.